Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry, from tech companies such as 3x3 that use data to unlock brands' growth, to today's guest, Andrew Means of Transom, who helps wineries create meaningful connections with their customers. Today's episode is brought to you by Barrels Ahead. Barrels Ahead is a wine and craft marketing agency that propels organic growth by using the powerful combination of content development, search engine optimization, and paid search. At Barrels Ahead, we know your business is unique, and we work with you to create an actionable, one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, and makes your business stand out from your competitors. So Andrew, in short, Barrels Ahead helps you unlock your content so that you can enjoy the results and revenue your business deserves. So what are you waiting for? Unlock your content today. Go to barrelsahead.com or email us at hello@barrelsahead.com to learn more. Before introducing today's guest, I want to give a big thank you to Duncan Alney over at Firebelly Marketing. Duncan and his team help beverage brands be more likable and profitable using social media. So I'm super excited to have today's guest on the show, Andrew Means from Transom. Now, I met Andrew last year at the Direct-to-Consumer Wine Symposium, and we hit it off immediately. We found that we both had very similar backgrounds. We both majored in philosophy, and we both now run marketing agencies. And one of the things that really set Andrew apart from everyone that I met at this conference was his unique business card. Now, I'll let him tell you a little bit more about that a little bit later in our show. Andrew is the creative director at Transom, a boutique creative agency that specializes in helping wineries create meaningful connections with new customers and deepen their relationships with existing ones. Transom's design philosophy uses anthropology, story theory, and modern brain science to uncover the areas of emotional resonance between companies and those they are trying to reach. Couple fun facts. When Andrew's not running his agency, you can find him cycling, sailing, or DJing. That is when there's not a global pandemic. So welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thanks, Drew. It's nice to be here.
Oh, it's nice to have you here. So tell me a little bit more about yourself. How did this background in philosophy eventually lead to forming Transom?
When I was in college, at the time, I actually wanted to be a pastor.
Really?
Yeah, over time, I started to realize that I was getting more out of my philosophy classes, and that time is just such a time of kind of growth and learning what kind of an adult you're going to be, and so over time, I started to kind of think that like, okay, yeah, philosophy is really what I'm really jazzed about. And at the time I kind of expected, I'll be a philosophy professor then.
Exactly what I thought.
At some point, I don't remember when this was, it was far enough in advance that nobody was caught too off guard by it, but they sat all of the philosophy majors down and they said, so you guys are all majoring in philosophy. You're going to graduate in some amount of time. It was like next year or something. And a lot of you are probably thinking about going into grad school. And the only advice that we can give you is that if you can at all avoid it, don't go. And I was like, And because I just assumed, I'll go into grad school, become a philosophy professor. And when they said that, I was like, interestingly, like I don't really have any like burning philosophical questions. I felt pretty kind of as intellectually fulfilled as like anybody can feel, and they're like 21 or something. But at that point I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm not going to be a philosophy professor, at least not right now. And I had been doing a lot of design, I had taken a couple of design classes, but I'd been doing a lot of design for our local, our college radio station and for my band at the time. And I was insanely lucky. Like the music editor at this alt weekly, who I had become friends with, was like, hey, our art director is taking another position. Do you want to interview for that? And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. This is like literally 2 weeks before graduation. I had no plan. And he had seen some work that I had done, like this whole press pack that I had made for the band. And so I hung up the phone and I'm like, what does an art director do exactly? And so I had to go and Google, what does an art director do? And ended up getting that job. And then just kind of gradually over time, moved back over to the west side of the state to Seattle and was a marketing manager for a machine importer company that, again, hugely lucky. This company had no real call to have a full-time marketing manager in terms of what they actually needed. And so I had all this extra time to, continue to learn how to code and continue to learn how to develop sites, and eventually started my own agency, which at the time was called Reunion. I did that for a number of years. And then a colleague of mine was like, do you want to start an agency? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And he left the company a couple of years later, and I've been running it ever since.
Awesome. Great story. I'm always surprised to find how many people in the wine industry and the agency space were philosophy majors. Why do you think that's so?
I don't know. I think that like there's a, I can say why I think for me, or what philosophy has like given me. I think I have a definite analytical mind, and so philosophy makes a lot of sense. And I think that innate kind of curiosity is really that suits what I do for a living very well. Being creative and wanting to understand, each of our clients, it's really important to feel connected to those clients. And I think that innate curiosity and the analysis helps me to learn about our clients, and then also helps me to actually be of value to them by actually understanding what their problem is and how to solve it.
And I can see that in your site. You talk about story theory, modern brain science, anthropology. That sounds like philosophy repackaged. And I mean, to create emotional resonance. I mean, now there's some structure behind that. Can you go into that a bit?
Yeah. When we first started Transom, we were the original formulation of the agency was basically to be a just a digital agency. We were like, we're going to make websites. And a lot of times what would happen is we would design these sites that looked cool, and then we would build the sites, and then we would we'd hand them off, but they wouldn't. I'd kind of watch as they would leave the shop, and I would just kind of look after it and just kind of be like, there's something that's not really, like, the moment isn't really being created there. And over time, we started to realize more and more that what wasn't happening was the content. Like, we weren't telling a compelling story. We were relying on the client to tell that story. And because most people, because most business owners are, their perspective is on the business and what is going on and what they're, all of the million things that they have to deal with. I think it can be incredibly challenging. I think it's incredibly rare for a business owner to have to be thinking about the things that I think really matter, which are the emotional relationship that they have between their business and the customer. And so over time, we started thinking, okay, we should probably be writing the content for these sites, and we should be part of the photography, and basically so that we can make sure that there's like a really emotionally affecting story that's being told, and that experience overall, and that's going to help to like motivate whatever experience we want people to have, and whatever action we want them to take, whether that's putting a wine in a cart or whether that's, making a reservation or calling or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time, maybe over the past, 3-4 years, I've just really been getting more and more into what we're learning about the way the brain works, and how, how little of it we really have control over in the classical sense, in the sense that like in the person riding on the horse sense, like I think most of the time we kind of give our logical brain that kind of role. We think like I'm in control and I'm the one making the decisions. But the more that we learn about the way the brain works, it's much more like a monkey riding on the back of a wild boar. I have an article on the Transom site that goes into that. But like, we think, oh, we're in control, but actually the reasoning part of our brain is immensely over. We vastly overestimate its ability to make decisions, and the vast majority of our decisions are made purely on an emotional level, or majority on an emotional level, and so anytime you're marketing something, that needs to be the place to start in terms of what kind of feelings are we generating, or are we trying to generate, and those feelings then are the ones that actually result in real action. Car companies have known this forever. I mean, the bikini clad model doesn't make the car go any faster, but it does. It makes that, the mammalian part of your brain think like, oh, I'm going to, these are the kind of ladies that are just going to flock to me once I get this Mustang.
I get it. So you know what? That leads right into something that you and I have both talked about quite a bit in the past, and that technology has actually changed in the last year and a half to allow companies, both of our companies, to actually help instill more emotion onto the websites and into that buying process. And there's a company that I'm going to mention it. It's Commerce 7. And the work that they have been doing to actually detach the sales process from the actual website has been very liberating. You might want to have you, and I know you've been using it and you're a big fan of it.
Yeah. We've been really pleased with our experience with them. I think for a long time, most of the legacy systems that have been available to wineries have been kind of back-end systems, right? They're kind of the equivalent of like all the processing power is all on the server. And so they'll end up, all of the experience that you have has to be kind of generated there, and has to be kind of like, and so what a lot of times you'll have is either a site that has a very distinct commerce component, and then the storytelling component, which a lot of times ends up, I don't know, there's a lot of very kind of like legacy code-based systems that, I think are still kind of trying, but because their code bases were built so long ago, they're not able to take advantage of kind of the modern way of building functionality like this, which is to use it all on the front end through JavaScript and stuff. And so it's been really cool to see how Commerce 7, and I expect other companies are going to be, right behind in terms of their functionality here pretty soon. But to see how they've the thing that we love is that they've enabled us to merge the two experiences and to have that whole experience be seamless front to back. Yeah.
And there's a lot of good POS systems out there, and there's a lot that have to try to do everything, and those fit certain use cases. But, a lot of times you want the freedom to be able to create that synergy, create that kind of emotional connection
Exactly.
And they're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. We, a lot of times we just had somebody ask us about, or send us an RFP, and the budget that they had was very, very low. And I think that there's an expectation now. There's an expectation now that I think has kind of artificially lowered, or there's a reality now that has, I think, artificially lowered the expectations of what web design costs. And I think a lot of that is like Squarespace and other kind of places where it's like, hey, you can do it. It's easy. There's and they're charging, very small amounts of money to do that. But I think that there's this kind of expectation. It's like, oh, isn't it all just like templates? And can't you just make, just like customize a template, right? Isn't that all that is? And for us, it's like, it's never been about a template because we're starting with the content and rather than shoehorn in somebody's content into a template that doesn't really fit it. For us, it's always been about designing from scratch. And so Commerce 7 has been really cool because we can build whatever narrative and whatever experience we want to have so that it has the right touch points at the right moments, and there's no constraints along those lines. It's a cool system, and I'm excited for these other e-commerce systems to catch up.
What I always tell people when they to try to set the expectations on because there's cheap design, cheap websites, it's really easy to get 90% of the way there.
Yeah,
but it's that emotional connection that's in the last 10%, and that's actually what you're paying for.
Yeah. That consideration takes a lot of time.
So going into 2021, when vaccinations are ramping up, society's opening back up, tasting rooms are opening back up, what should wineries be doing right now, coming into this new era now that we've all been locked down for a year?
Well, I think there's not going to be a silver bullet. I don't think there are the same kind of strategic or the same kind of tidal forces that have been in play for the last 5 years are going to continue to be in play. We tend to focus more on the strategy side versus like the marketing side. But I do know that like, and what I think what we will see this summer is, a lot of pent up, God willing, what we will see this summer is a lot of pent up, a lot of people are going to be like, let's go and let's like experience all this stuff. So there is,
and that's what they said after the 1918 Spanish flu. That's where the Roaring 20s started. People could go out again and hit the bars.
It might be really roaring. Yeah. I'm ready to roar, boy.
Get back on the DJing gig.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. That'll be good.
Have you done any like virtual DJs on the?
Yeah, actually, one of our clients, Matthew's Estate Winery in Woodinville, had me do a couple virtual DJ things. They had a greenhouse this past spring and summer, so they had I can't remember what they called it, something in the greenhouse. It was fun. So we just streamed on Instagram and played enough like obscure music to not get shut down by Instagram.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, it was really cool. As far as like what's happening now, I think there are huge opportunities, but in the same way that in the 90s, you could start a winery and just by virtue of the fact of there not being that many wineries, you could kind of skimp on brand story and you could skimp on, or you didn't even really have to think about it because people would come in, they would have a great experience and provided you're, making the experience good. And if your wine is good enough, then there will be some segment of the population that will be like, you know what? they were having a great day that day, or they genuinely just really connected with the wine or whatever. And so you could build a following that way. And I think there's a lot of wineries out there that are, have kind of been skating on that for a long time. And that's, in the right market, that's totally doable. And I would very much expect that all wineries who were able to take advantage of the, this summer or next summer or whatever, of this kind of ebullience that we're going to be hopefully experiencing. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think a lot of people will be like, this is fantastic. But a lot of that isn't really scalable. And over time, once these kind of like immediate waves start to settle down, we're still wineries are still facing, a younger generation. So you've got the boomers are aging out. Gen X is going to be the one is going to be the generation to be buying the most wine, with millennials right behind, who are experiencing a lot more increased purchasing power, but they're also have so much more things competing for their attention than the boomers did. So, you've got craft beer, you've got craft spirits, you've got non-alcoholic drinks, and legal marijuana. Like, there's all kinds of other kind of pressures that are going to be playing into a wine market that I think is going to be increasingly competitive in the coming years. And the way to, from a strategic standpoint, there's a million kind of marketing things that obviously that you need to take into account. But from a strategic standpoint, like your brand, I think it's going to be really, really critical that, if your brand is, we are a family run small winery and people like us because we're us. There's a million of those wineries out there, and they are all, working hard, and they're all, for them, like, that story is compelling. And for the people maybe who are already their fans, that story is compelling. But in order to create new fans, you have to tell a story that has some amount of novelty to it. And that story has to resonate with people, so that when they're pouring that wine for their friends, they are telling their friends a story, and that story will literally make the wine taste better. Like, literally. I think we probably talked about this.
I sold wine on the retail floor for 10 years, and
yeah. And
story.
You need a story, and that story, when they put people in the MRI machine and they tell the person, this wine, we got it at 7-Eleven and it cost $3, and the person's like, well, this wine's all right. And then they feed the people the exact same wine, but they tell them this is from, Chateau Neuf du Pape, and it's this amazing producer and whatever. And the person's like, this wine is amazing. And with the MRI machine, they can see that the pleasure centers of their brain, like, literally lit up more than with a bad story. It's the exact same, chemicals that are happening in the mouth, but it's all about the narrative that is told in the brain. And I think that, there's a lot of wineries that are probably thinking, boy, I wish I could I wish I had the budget to buy like all new French oak, that would just make the wine so much better. But you could take that budget and you could spend it on like professional photography and messaging, and you may very well make your wine literally, again, taste better to the people who are drinking it than if you would actually, like, the narrative is part of the winemaking process. It should be, at least.
Absolutely. And now it's really, so what I was saying this pandemic really highlighted the fact that your online presence has to be on the forefront. And with Gen Z coming in, most of the time, they're only going to experience you for the first time online. Your online story has to be perfect because they may never walk into your tasting room.
Exactly.
Last year proved it.
Yeah.
So we're kind of what my hypothesis now is that some of these wineries need to actually step up their tasting room experience, because some of them have done such a good job doing an online experience that when they get to when the people eventually visit the winery, they're like, what? This isn't anything like what I thought online.
Yeah.
So you need to keep that synergy, and almost the script's been flipped in that you've got to keep both things going. And maybe in the last year, a lot of the wineries did step up, but a lot didn't. But it's not going away. We've kind of redefined how we interact online, and that's not going to go away in the next couple of years.
Yeah, there's been a lot of room, I think, in the industry for not very customer centric business practices and marketing, and websites that aren't super friendly or whatever. Like people were very motivated, and so they would just find you, or they would be tours or whatever. But and like wine clubs that didn't let you customize things, and just a lot of shipping costs that are astronomical, and all this other kind of stuff that wasn't very accommodating to the customer. And I think those days are well and gone. I think if you're not giving people the ability to customize their wine club shipments, or at least having some other way that they, like some sort of option for people who want to do that. And if you're not making it easy for them to find you and all that kind of stuff, like you're toast.
Mm-hmm. And then speaking about those wine club shipments, a lot of those shipments need to, like I spent a lot of time talking with about custom boxes and the actual unpacking of the wine club shipment, and how important that is, especially if someone's never been at the winery.
Right.
You get your delivery, and oftentimes it's just in a plain brown box. You open it, and you've got an invoice and you've got your bottles.
Right.
With there's no pizzazz in it at all. And we know that, with Empathy Wines and Naked Wines, people have really stepped that up. And I was talking to Kim over at Sandbox. She's runs Loop Graphics, and she's got a custom boxing solution that helps them with the packaging. And it makes a lot of sense, especially if some of these people never visit the winery. Yeah. That's their one tangible experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think about every month or every couple months, that decision has to be made. Do I want to still be part of this? Mm-hmm. And if every month you're getting a box that's all drab, and you just like open it up and you're like, well, now I've got these 3 bottles. Like, I guess I'll just set them over here. Mm-hmm. Then that's, that's just you're just kind of like coasting. It's like you're a glider, and all you can do is ever just maintain altitude or just continue to lose it. And by creating like a really delightful experience when they open that box, and showing them how much you care about them by investing in that experience, like that's a massive opportunity for people to show that, hey, you're really valuable to us, whether or not you ever set foot in the tasting room. And if somebody's on multiple clubs and they've got one club that like has like some sort of rad, thing inside, or like cool tape on the box or something like that, like that, the other clubs are going to be the ones to get the boot,
Oh, absolutely. Just include a recipe card and, your tasting notes, something to make it seem that this is a special shipment. Taste this wine with this card, follow it up with a virtual tasting where maybe the chef cooks the recipe, or the winemaker. I was part of one of those the other day.
That's awesome. That's rad. Yeah. For our client Lobo Hills in Woodinville, we created like a whole like tasting note card for people to kind of write their things on that link to a virtual tasting. And yeah, there's so many opportunities of just little details that you can do that don't even have to be expensive, right? I mean, that's something you can just print off.
Speaking of details, I know people are waiting to hear about your business card. Now, I got to say, in theory, it seems simple, but man, it made an impression. And I tell that story all the time. So when I met Andrew, he's like, I got a business card for you. And he handed me a bottle of wine that was his business card that had all his information on the back. Talk about creating an emotional connection. Suddenly I see this wine, and suddenly Andrew, wine, bottle, never forgot about it. How did you come up with that?
how did we come up with that? I think, I don't know. I think it was just like, well, we have, we've got winery clients who I was like, I bet we could get some shiners from some of our winery clients. And we decided to, just design. Yeah. It was one of those things where like you said, it's kind of a simple idea. It's like, as soon as we came up with the idea, we were like, oh, okay. Yeah. Well, we know what we need to do. And, so we put together a little, it's kind of a bummer because we still have a bunch of them, because, after COVID hit, which was very shortly after we met, it was like, well, there's not a lot of opportunities to continue to distribute these. So basically whoever we, end up giving the rest of them to, it'll have aged beautifully. It's a really nice cab, actually.
And that's the key. If you'd handed me the bottle and it was like kind of crap, right. So if you guys do this, you want to make sure that you do it with a good bottle of wine that re-emphasizes the person that you're trying to remember. Yeah,
exactly.
No, that was a great idea.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun. It was a fun project.
Oh man. So, what are some of these action steps that wineries should take going down the road today, moving into the next few months?
I think in the next few months, especially if you feel like you have the bandwidth to do it, I always think, they say that what's the old proverb? The time to plant a tree was 20 years ago or today. So brand is something that is long-term, it's strategic, but it's an investment that pays off. And so I think if you haven't spent some real time thinking about, what story do my fans, because most wineries, of course, will have some fans, even the worst, bar cover band, dive bar cover band is going to have, some groupies, right? They're going to have some people who show up. And so there's some resonance that's happening there that is important. And I think I would start out by asking yourself, like, what story do my fans, do the people who are fans of my winery, what do they tell their friends when they're pouring a bottle or pouring a glass for them? And is that story unique? Is it memorable? And is it scalable? Those are really important questions, because if it's not unique, then it's not really memorable. And by memorable, I would say, like, it needs to be concise enough for it to be memorable. We talk a lot with our clients about myths. This kind of goes back to the philosophy stuff, but
is this the monkey riding a boar?
Yeah, you could say there's so yeah, it is to a degree, in the sense that, like, I can get into the brain stuff later, but a myth is not, most people think of a myth as like, oh, this is just a story that's not true. And many, many myths are not true, but a myth is really just a story that is shaped for the way that our brain learns and the way that our brain remembers. And so it fits into our brain, and it becomes, it just fits into the way that our brain learns and remembers, because it has some sort of emotional resonance to it. It's simple enough that that it's easy to remember. It doesn't have a ton of like facts and stuff like that. And that's why a lot of stories kind of become mythologized, maybe even that started out true, but the facts get kind of rubbed off, because they get put into and taken out of our brains so much. And so when you're thinking about a brand, when we're talking with our clients about how do we create a brand, our goal really is to create a myth. And hopefully that's a true myth, like we really think that you can't, maybe I'm sure there are some brands out there or agencies out there that don't care about that. For us, that's really important. We really believe that whatever is that all of our clients, or at least we've never met a client that we didn't feel like there was some sort of real kind of central je ne sais quoi for about them, that you could build a story that was, compelling.
Sure.
Off of there. So I feel like I'm getting off track here because you asked me what people could do. But
near term. Figuring out your myth is huge. I remember a book by Patrick Hanlon, I believe, Brand DNA, where he goes into the deep myth. The core of a brand is that myth. It's that just undefinable formula, if you might say. It's been a while since I've read the book.
An easy thing to do is to look at your about page on your site.
Precisely.
And does it say what you do, or does it say why you do what you do? Mm-hmm. Because what you do is almost certainly not news to anybody. But why you do what you do is compelling, almost just in and of itself. It's very, very often is the most compelling part of the story. And it's very often where we start. Well,
that's great. Yeah, with wine suppliers, we've been working with them for that same deal, because too often wineries, they get the idea that it's it's the vineyard, it's the story of the family, and all the we all know that story. Yeah. But too often on the supply side, it's like, here's our widget. You should buy our widget that will help you make the wine. Here's our barrel. Mm-hmm. It's not, and they don't show what went into making that widget. Why did they make that widget? How does that widget actually make the process better, faster? So it's entirely, what you're saying is entirely the first step that even we take. It's a good reminder. Why have an about us page? Why even have the website?
Yeah, there's the hero's journey has that section of there's the call to adventure, there's the refusal of the call, there's the acceptance of the call, and then I might be leaving out sections. It's been a while for my Joseph Campbell, but then there's the meeting of the friends, or the meeting of the allies, and so companies like that are perfectly placed to be those allies, and introducing those characters into, because everybody's the hero of their own story, and so like wineries are like, well, we're fighting our fight, and you're like, but introducing these characters who are there to assist them in their struggle, and that are motivated, uniquely motivated, and are invested in their success is a fantastic way to frame that.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great point. And as we're kind of wrapping down here, I always kind of ask one question. What are you drinking these days?
Let's see. It's not wine, but it's this amazing Armagnac that, oh gosh. I developed a taste for Armagnac, and I'm terrible. I can't remember exactly the brand. There's a French restaurant here in Seattle called L'Oursin. Oh. That it means the urchin in French, and they had to turn into a little French market, and with COVID, and so they have like all this amazing French wine and Armagnac and other kinds of just really obscure French booze, in addition to like cheese and all this other kind of stuff. And the last time my wife Amy and I were there, they were doing après ski fondue outside. They had these two little tables set up outside, and
nice.
And so we were dipping our cheese in the fondue and stuff like that, and drinking this warm, or this hot wine, vin chaud, I guess. The translation is literally hot wine. And so we went back inside, and I think that they intentionally, kind of get you a little bit liquored up, and then you just
good tactic.
You see all of this amazing array, and you're like, let's add that to the basket, and that, and so that's been the thing lately. That's been really my go-to is like a Boilermaker. It's like a Rainier and a bourbon.
Nice.
It's hard to beat.
Keep it old school.
Yeah.
Keep it old school.
Yeah.
So I do have to say though, I do prefer Armagnac over Cognac. A little richer, fuller bodied.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's just so good.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being on the show today. Today we've been talking with Andrew Means. He's the creative director at Transom. And Andrew, where can people learn more about you and more specifically figure out how a monkey rides a wild boar?
You can go to just transom.design that's our home on the web.
Great. So if you're looking to connect your story with your winery or even across the board in the food and beverage industry or the food and beverage space, Transom Design is really one of the go-to places for me. I refer people there all the time. So thank you very much, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Drew. It's been really great chatting with you.
Great chatting with you.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.